What a day for One Piece. Chapter 1050, you can kind of say, is the end, or almost the end, of the Wano Kuni arc, but also it is the end of Luffy versus Kaido. And with this chapter's arrival, it brings a conclusion to something that has been built up, set up, and really been a big driving point of the One Piece story for about 10 years, a whole decade. That's a long time. And what I mean by this is that like over 10 years ago in the manga, Law and Luffy made a pact to defeat Kaido, to bring Kaido down. And after such a long time, it's finally happened. Kaido has fallen, and Big Mom as well alongside of him. And it's a very emotional moment for a lot of reasons because it's been a long journey. Like, this is something I always think to myself when I see moments like this in the One Piece story, because it's very rare to see such a long journey finally get a conclusion. Like, we've had 10 years of this. That's a long time to build this up. And it makes me always think, when One Piece comes to an end, when the final page is written by Oda, and the manga comes to an end, the final chapter, we're going to look back at the legacy, the expansive nature that is One Piece itself, and be like, holy crap, so much has happened already to this very point. With just 50 chapters, like 1,050 chapters, so much has already happened. And it's crazy to think that with Kaido effectively being defeated, and Big Mom too alongside of him, we are very close to the conclusion, the end of the journey of One Piece. Because once again, you go back years ago, not even 10 years ago, 3-4 years ago, Kaido as an entity, as a Yonko, as an emperor, you know, he's looked at as one of the strongest, one of the strongest entities in the One Piece verse. I mean, we can argue with Shanks, we can argue with Blackbeard, but still kind of Yonkos, and then we can obviously argue about Akainu, and then, you know, Emu, but overall, like, there's not really that many really far up above Kaido. There's a few, but not that many. We are really, really close. Like, you can literally see the horizon in the distance for One Piece, and that is the significance of this chapter. The first things first that really just needs to be dived into is that this chapter is a very huge step to the final chapter. Like, this is a 10-year journey that finally has seen a conclusion. That's crazy. That is absolutely crazy to think about. So obviously there's a lot to consider here. We have Kaido's defeat and Big Mom's defeat. Now, I've already seen it before the officials came out today, and I decided to sit down and read the chapter. You know, like I read officials. You know, I already saw spoilers and people talking about it, so I was kind of already aware of what was going to happen this chapter before it came out, sadly. But it doesn't change the fact. My thoughts still stand. People were very upset with this chapter. Like, there's not like a huge amount, but there is definitely people that are upset with this chapter. And I think that their overall criticism of 1,050, chapter 1050 of One Piece is definitely valid to a certain extent. And I want to talk about all this in a second. I want to talk about why people feel that way, how I feel about the situation, and stuff like that. But, I have heard the criticisms to Kaido, and Kaido's defeat for this chapter is, like I said, it's huge. It's a big thing for the One Piece storyline. And people, when they look at Kaido, he is supposedly one of the strongest. But he went down, and people feel like Kaido went down relatively easy. Now, granted, we gotta remember, there's been a 10-year setup for this to bring him down. But when we're just looking at the fight, people want to just look at the fight. They want to look at Luffy going up against Kaido. That's what people really put in perspective, and, you know, the actual fight. And if we do really look at the fight, people argue that Kaido isn't as threatening, or he's more disappointing than any of the previous fights. For instance, if we look at, let's say, Katakuri, a really good recent example, or we look at Doflamingo, you know, those are very iconic fights. Really great fights within the One Piece story, and they were definitely great antagonists for their arc. However, Kaido as an entity, as I've already kind of reinforced, he's someone that has been built up for 10 years, for a very long time. And because of how much time has been dedicated to his character, obviously his overall weight to the story is way more immense than anything that Katakuri has, or Doflamingo has, Crocodile has, etc. All these other villains. You know, Kaido is way bigger in the grand scheme of things. So people, when they look at the way he fell in this, they feel like it's very anticlimactic. It's very... It feels rushed. And like I said, I can agree to a certain extent, because one of the things that people I think are upset about Kaido is the fact that he lacks a really good backstory. And that's something I see a lot, because when we look at what he misses out of all the other villains I mentioned, it's pretty much him missing a really good backstory. Doflamingo got one, Katakuri got one, and they're some of the best. Like, people love those two antagonists because of just their backstory, finding out more about them. And so when you look at Kaido, he lacks that. He lacks that development that the others got. However, Oda did do something very fascinating with the previous chapter, 1049. He actually did give us a brief flashback of Kaido. Nothing extensive like other antagonists before Kaido, but Kaido did get one. And the backstory does actually give us a lot about Kaido's character that I feel like many are quick to glance over, and how Kaido is being more used as a stepping stone than anything else. And so let's get into it. The backstory of Kaido opens up literally mentioning the Celestial Dragons and the weight that the Celestial Dragons have on the world. And we all, as One Piece readers that we've read this far already in the story, and if you're up to date with the anime, know how impactful the Celestial Dragons are, how they have affected everything within the story. And so, seeing Kaido's backstory open up with the Celestial Dragons just shows Kaido's very circumstances. His very potentially being in the position he's at, is thanks to what the Celestial Dragons doing. For instance, paying tribute. The heavenly tribute that the country had to pay to them, and which forced Kaido to be a child soldier. So, in its own way, Kaido was the product of the very world itself. The government, the world government, created Kaido. You could kind of spin it like that. Now, in terms of Kaido's mentality and how he is as a person, because people like to say his only motivation is to fight. He just wants a good fight, he wants to die an honorable death, etc., stuff like that. And now knowing that he was a child soldier, fighting at a very early age, it makes a lot more sense now about his psyche. We got a lot about his psyche with that, finding out that that's the reason why. All he's ever known is fighting. That's all he's ever seen and all he's ever known. And when he's always seen these nobles forcing people to fight on the battlefield, but the nobles never fought on the battlefield, for instance, aka the Celestial Dragons. And that kind of paints Kaido in a very different way, because Kaido, he's an individual that feels like commanders, generals, royalty should fight. And it explains why he's treated so much royalty like he has done. For instance, like Odin, why he's treated Momo like he's done. It explains why he fights on the battlefield, why he takes his own initiative to fight, is because he is someone that believes that a ruler or a king or a noble, whatever, should also be on the battlefield and fighting. So it explains a lot about his character. I feel like the backstory gave a lot of context to something that has been lacking. Obviously, it's not a lot that people wanted, but I do feel like Oda did a good job for a few reasons. For one, giving us motivation, Kaido motivation, that I feel like he wanted to be this entity, this force that would stand in the way and be the gate for Joy Boy's return. Because the entire conversation with him and King, with the flashback in 1049, it hints at the fact that King is waiting for someone to arrive. And Kaido accepts and is aware that he isn't Joy Boy. He's aware that he isn't that person that King is waiting for. But he's like, the only person that could potentially be the person King is waiting for is if someone beats Kaido. So I feel like Kaido put up this airs, this ruse, that was unstoppable. He was supposed to be the wall to really set up for someone to initiate a new era of change. In a way, you could kind of view it as some self-sacrifice. Now, once again, we don't have a lot of clarification to Kaido, because he needs more backstory, but you could spin it in many different ways. And I think that ambiguous backstory to Kaido is fascinating to me. And so, even though I don't think he's probably my favorite antagonist, like he's not up there with Luffy or like Katakuri, etc., I do think that Kaido as a character is more of showcasing he was just a gear in the grand scheme of things. He was more of something to initiate the ending of One Piece, to initiate the final battle, to initiate a new world of change. I feel like that's more of what Kaido represents when we look at what his character is and what his defeat actually means for the storyline. Now, getting off of Kaido for a second, I do want to talk about the fact that with Kaido, well, I guess I am getting back on with Kaido. Kaido landing in the lava, I don't think he's dead. Okay, I know people are going to draw the conclusion that Kaido's dead, Big Mom's dead, but no. I think, honestly, and I know I'm not the only one that's going to say this, they got blasted off. Like, when the volcano erupted, Big Mom and Kaido got probably ejected from the island, Team Rocket style, launched far off in the distance, and they're probably going to get captured by the Navy or something. Something like that's probably going to happen, because I know that there's speculation that the volcano and Sea Prism Stone is probably the reason why Sea Prism Stone exists, and since Wano's kind of like the origin of Sea Prism and how it's manipulated, you could kind of assume that maybe that volcano has something to do with it, and because of Big Mom and Kaido being encased in it, that we see in chapter 1050, it's very likely that they could get captured. That's my opinion on it. Now, besides that, we gotta look at going forward. What's next for One Piece? Obviously, with the defeat of two emperors, there's gonna be bounty updates. We're gonna get to see the Straw Hats get bounty updates. We're gonna get to see Kid, Law, and all of them have bounty updates. We're gonna get to see Adult Momo. We're gonna get to see Big Newsboy. We're gonna get to see, who's actually gonna be the Shogun. I'll talk more about that in a second. We're gonna get to see an overall power shift of who's gonna be the actual new Yonkos, because if Big Mom and Kaido's defeated, there's probably gonna be two that are gonna replace them. So we know Luffy's gonna be there, but who's going to be the other one? Is it going to be Law, or is it going to be Kid? Or are they going to be counted as the same? Stuff like that. What's going on with Zoro? I mean, we got the stuff with, Toko, and I want to talk about that, actually. I like how vague and ambiguous Yasui and Yasui's child's, backstory is in chapter 1050. I think that's really cool to basically show that Yasui, we were assuming that maybe he might have ate the Smile Devil fruit or whatever, but in fact, it's implied that he might not have. And so the entire time he's showing a smile and laughing throughout the village before he died, he could have been putting on this airs to make everybody feel better that he was a part of them. He was alongside of them, but in reality, he was just, laughing and putting on a face, a mask. I think that'd be very interesting. It's a very ambiguous part of the chapter, and I appreciate that little subtle writing from Oda. But anyways, we also got stuff with Komurasaki, which is what I'm looking at right here on the screen, and I feel like this is some very shady stuff here. Okay, so the way the final part of 1050 is implied is that Momo's revealing himself, he is this, dragon, he's not Kaido, etc., etc., and the way Komurasaki comes in and everybody starts to see her, I feel like she might become the Shogun. That's at least what the chapter vibe is giving you. And the reason why I say this is because Momo, he can do something really cool here. If he does in fact look like he's father, Oda can do something very interesting with Momo's character. He can have Momo journey with Luffy, a reenactment of Odin, and since he looks like Odin, it's kind of like full circle type stuff, and Momo was on Roger's ship as well. So there's a lot of ways to look at this, and I feel like, Momo might journey with Luffy. And then speaking of journeying, we got Yamato. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen with Yamato. She's going to really stay behind, or she's going to join Luffy. I'm going to assume join Luffy, but there's a lot of things there. And then we got this stuff with, will Wano truly be open? Obviously it said not open yet, but when will it open? We got the Reverie stuff, finding out more about the Reverie and what's going to happen there. It's so much. There is so much that has happened, and what to consider at this point, because this arc is absolutely huge. It's a huge arc. And I'm excited, honestly, for the future of One Piece. But before I wrap up this video, I want to ask, how do you feel about Kaido? Do you think Kaido was a good antagonist, a good villain, worth the build-up for 10 years, or do you think everything was anticlimactic? Be honest. I am curious to see everybody's thoughts. But with that, guys, be safe, stay healthy. Chibi out.